Welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli, and it is now 9:08 p.m. in Central Europe. The icy winds of winter are already making themselves manifest in Budapest. As you can see, I'm even wearing a sweater. That's how cold it is. So, just a few weeks ago, I was cheerfully, so to speak, still talking about summer. And now the brutal, sunless days of fall and winter are upon us. However, on a more cheerful note, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate your being here. And, we're going to have a nice conversation. And obviously, the first thing to talk about is the aftermath of the Trump-Harris debate. Now, we talked about it with Peter yesterday, and I made the point that the meme of the dogs and cats being killed and eaten in Springfield, Ohio, may be the lingering impression that people will have of the debate. And I think that's becoming apparent because as I've been looking through Twitter today, I see more and more of these memes involving Trump as the savior of the country's pets. So it's like, he's rushing in to save the cats, the country's cats. And Harris is out to get the cats, and Trump, is saving the cats. Let's see if I can get a little bit better light. Maybe that's a bit better light. Anyway, so that's very interesting because amidst all the talk about policy and whatnot, the lingering impression it remains the dogs and cats. And Trump is very shrewd like that. He when he brought that up, he knew that that's what will attract the attention. Now, the media have gone into their usual spiel of debunking the claims about the migrants eating cats. They're debunking it. Now, the problem with these debunking, well, first of all, you're drawing attention to the subject. So the more you debunk, the more people become aware of it. So even the least political person, he knows about dogs and cats, and he feels quite strongly about dogs and cats. And nonetheless, so when you debunk, people start thinking about it. Well, what's the story with these dogs and cats? But the other thing is that the debunking isn't really very convincing, because you can say, well, there's no evidence for it, and that's probably who knows what the story is. There's clearly is evidence on the other side. I mean, we've seen this YouTube video, I think it's on YouTube, of this woman who has been caught eating a cat. Now, the debunking claim is that, well, she's not from Springfield. This is from somewhere else. It's not from Springfield. Yeah, but there's somebody eating a cat. I mean, so I don't know whether she's Haitian, or what her status is, but she was eating a cat. Now, so that doesn't. It's not a very effective way to debunk a claim by saying, well, I was in some other town. It wasn't really in Springfield. And so that's that's the point. So now you've got these official, so no, we don't have evidence for it, and then you've got people who are claiming, that this is happening, and there's obviously evidence at the very least that migrants have been helping themselves to the geese in the public park. So that's a little unfortunate. I mean, the geese are probably quite tasty, but you're not supposed to help yourself to the geese in the public park. But the point is that is a lingering impression from the debate. Now you've got all the sort of people who are getting into this mode of thinking about, oh, well, it's debunking or whatever. There's no proof, like Michael Tracy. Oh, well, there's no proof for this, whatever. It doesn't really matter because you're kind of missing the wood for the trees. I mean, the real story here is that 20,000 migrants have been dumped on this city in Ohio. And this is causing a great deal of consternation among the people of this city. Now, it doesn't matter whether you got that this story may be somewhat exaggerated. It's a very big deal that migrants are just being dumped on communities. Again, they're not being dumped on the wealthy and comfortable. They go on living in their nice, comfortable lives. They're being dumped on ordinary people. And they want to maintain their towns in their nice condition. So if you have geese in the park, you want to retain the geese in the park. You don't want people coming in and helping themselves for some late supper. And so it's just ridiculous to start saying, oh, well, we go, the Republicans don't have evidence for this, and Trump doesn't have evidence for this. This is ridiculously trivial. The issue of mass migration is the biggest issue of the day. This is what people really care about. It's not just about the United States. It's the same throughout Europe. We've seen, I recorded a video about this yesterday about Germany, how Germany, of all countries, has now changed its policies and wants to close its borders. We've had the problems in Italy. We've had one populist leader after another failing, but nonetheless, these populist leaders come and go, and they're always swept into power on the promise that they're going to do something about migration. And then, of course, we have Great Britain, which is now opening up its prisons for the Facebook posters, the people who've been posting on Facebook saying mean things about immigrants. As this is the Starmer way of cracking down on illicit thoughts. Anyone who has these negative thoughts about immigration. So this is an issue that's been a long time coming. I mean, I've talked about this here many times before. I mean, it was brought up famously by Enoch Powell in Great Britain in April 1968. So that's a long time ago. And he warned then the famous promise or a warning about the Tiber foaming with much blood. So it's been going on for some time, and the liberal elites, the liberal metropolitan elites, the kind of progressive authoritarians who have run the West for really since World War II, they refused to take heed of this. They refused all these warnings. They were in favor of it. Maybe ultimately they were always thinking in terms of population replacement, bringing in a whole bunch of people who become supplicants and who can replace the native population, because the native population just wasn't sufficiently in tune with the progressive agenda. So let's just replace them and bring in some new people. And that, I think that's been going for a long time. But it's now become quite explosive with the emergence of Donald Trump, and then of course you've got Viktor Orban in Hungary, and obviously the elites are on the back foot. They weren't really expecting a phenomenon like Trump, and they've kind of done their best to try to crush him, eliminate him once and for all from the political scene. They haven't succeeded so far. But oh, look, it's Marty has got a picture of the Chihuahua. I think that's Peter's Peter's apple. You know, one of these savage hounds. Yeah, I mean, I think you know these dogs. I was thinking about these memes that I've been looking at today with you know, cats for Trump, dogs for Trump. You know, they're wearing MAGA hats and saying something, holding up signs. We are not food. So I think it's just. I mean, if you just look on Twitter, it's just hilarious memes. But anyway, I mean, this is clearly the central issue, this immigration. Now, the mode of these liberal progressive elites is to deal with these this problem by crushing the opposition. This is what they've always done, and this is the Keir Starmer's go-to response: just dump them in jail. Whack them over the head, and then that'll cool their heels, and they'll forget about protesting against this mass migration policy. And I think they've tried to do that with Trump. I mean, all the different ways in which they've tried to crush him, and it may work. Brute force and election cheating, imprisonment. This may work. They may well defeat Trump, and Trump may well end up in prison. Maybe it may well end up spending the rest of his life in prison. That could definitely happen. If he fails to win in November, Harris isn't going to give him any kind of a pardon. No, I think I know she doesn't like him. She absolutely would be happy to see him in prison. So that could still be down the road. But the other thing that I was thinking of, because I reread today the transcript of the debate, and it's well worth reading, several times over, because this absolutely ridiculous media spin. Oh, Harris was the winner. Harris won. Harris, he's got the wind in her sails. And then you've got these drooling idiots on Morning Joe. Not only is Harris going to win, Harris is going to win in a landslide. That they already they're talking about. Well, we need to re-educate America. They're already on the next plan. After Harris's landslide win, we have to re-educate Americans. Have to re-educate those Americans who had voted for Trump. They've got to learn, to rewire their brains, like Clockwork Orange. So that's already on Morning Joe. But the thing to keep in mind about the debates is that every time Trump is debated, the consensus among the media pundits, the legacy media, was that Trump lost. Go back to 2016, and the consensus was, of course, that Hillary Clinton won very easily. Well, every debate, yeah, she won this very easily. Think that 3 debates. Oh yeah, she won this. Yeah, absolutely won it. They said the same thing in 2020. Trump and Biden. Oh yeah, Biden won. Trump lost. So you have to then think about that. The people who are making these declarations, oh yeah, Harris won, are already predisposed to detest Trump and to see him defeated. So they're already watching this, and of course they say, they don't like him, they don't like the way he speaks, they don't like his manners, they don't like, the way he carries himself. So they say, oh yeah, he lost. Yeah, she wiped the floor with him. And again, yeah, but that's what you said about Hillary Clinton. Every time he debated Hillary Clinton, that's exactly what you said. You said that about Biden. That, oh yeah, he won. So then you really have to think, what is it that these media characters are? What are they looking for? Why are they always convinced that Trump lost this debate? Well, because every time somebody debates Trump, they spend their time attacking him. That's the mode. Hillary Clinton was doing this. You spend all of your time, they come up with these talking points. Hillary Clinton had her talking points. Oh, he's Putin's puppet. He does everything Putin tells him. Biden did the same thing. Oh yeah, Putin runs Trump. He's Putin's puppy. I think he said Putin's puppy. He said. And Harris did exactly the same thing. Oh, all these dictators, they all love you because, and you like all these dictators because you want to be a dictator yourself. So in other words, she came up with nothing new. Everything that she said had already been said many times before. And they're usually this crap that you get in the legacy media in the New York Times and so on. Oh yeah, Trump's a dictator. Trump's an authoritarian. Trump wants to send his opponents to prison. Trump loves Putin. He loves Putin. And because he wants to be like Putin. Oh, Trump loves Kim Jong-un. Yeah, because he wants to be like that. Trump loves Viktor Orban because he wants to be Viktor Orban. So there's nothing new. Harris said every single thing there that had been said by all of Trump's previous opponents. And every time they did all that, every time they piled on Trump, the media celebrated because that's what they think. That's what they say day in, day out. Everything that Harris said on Tuesday was what those buffoons on Morning Joe say every day. Oh yeah, Trump's an authoritarian. Trump loves Putin. Putin loves Trump. And so when Harris launched these attacks on Trump, and if you read the transcript, it's very interesting because it's a non-stop attack on Trump. I mean, she is the vice president of the incumbent administration. She's the incumbent vice president, and yet she was attacking Trump the whole time. From the very first question, which was, is the country better off economically today than it was 4 years ago? That was the first question, and she launched into a tirade against Trump, and every single thing, it was all the time, it was attacks on Trump. And this one, and she was even more extreme in her attacks because she then attacked his father and the legal problems that his father had with the Nixon Justice Department. But then it went on for some time. So I think it was even the Ford Justice Department, maybe the Jimmy Carter Justice Department before they settled. So they were basically, so the old man had built middle-class housing. I think it was called Trump Village. It was in Queens. It was basically middle-class housing. And but as the Nixon Justice Department, that was in the heyday of enforced integration. Everything had to be integrated. Schools had to be integrating. Housing projects had to be integrated. And so they basically Trump, the old man, wasn't renting out to blacks. And so that's why he ran into problems with the Nixon Justice Fund, and it went on for a long time before it was finally settled. But she brought all of that up, which is really peculiar because that has nothing to do with Donald. I mean that's with his father, and and then she brought up the Central Park Five. So Hillary Clinton she mainly brought up against Trump this whole nonsense about Putin and Russia and his supposed love for dictators, blah blah, and then Biden did much the same thing, but he also talked about the whole rubbish about the fine people on both sides and the rest. But Harris did something even worse, which they hadn't done, which neither Clinton nor Biden had done. I mean, they hadn't gone right back into the history books. Which was the Justice Department lawsuit against his father. And then into the Central Park Five. Now, again, she lied about the Central Park Five because Trump had never called for the execution of the Central Park Five. Okay, people probably just don't remember. This was a woman who was jogging in Central Park, and then she was assaulted, beaten very badly, and raped. And it seemed for a while that she might die. Then when she recovered, she basically had lost all memory, so she really couldn't remember who the perpetrator or perpetrators were. And then this was the Central Park Five, with this gang who went around on this merry endeavor, which was called wilding. I mean, the word is now lost, but back in the 1980s, this was an activity in which young men rushed around public parks, the Central Park, assaulting people, men, women. Women obviously were sexually assaulted, but men beaten up and robbed and so on. It was called wilding. And so that's what that was. It caused. It was a shock to New York and so on. So and then Trump, he took out a full-page ad in the New York Times about the Central Park Five. But it's a long time ago. I mean, I think it was, I can't remember, 88, 89. It was late 80s when this took place. And I guess she wanted to present this as, oh, well, he was always a racist. But the issue wasn't he was a racist. You could say he was an opportunist. He always had great ambitions for himself, but it had nothing to do with race. I mean, this was just a shocking event. I mean, everyone in New York was just shocked by what happened to this young woman. And that's why Trump got in on it. That back then in the 80s, I mean, Trump was trying to elevate himself into the national political scene. He already had plans then to run for president, but he wasn't really very well known nationally. He was very well known in New York, obviously, but he wasn't known nationally. And so, but he wanted to sort of grab any issue in order to propel himself into national prominence. And then the Central Park Five was one of those issues. But in fact, he really couldn't do much in terms of, I mean, he had national political ambitions, but they could never come to anything as long as he was just a New York figure. But what changed was when he did The Apprentice. The Apprentice gave him a national profile. That was just a huge TV show. And then the Celebrity Apprentice. He did that for several years, and that made him a national figure. So that by the time he ran in 2016, he was already then a national figure, but he wasn't in the early 90s. He was just a New York figure. So it was no, so he was just a very ambitious person. The whole, oh, he's a racist. It was not a racist. It was just it was a cause célèbre in New York with the Central Park Five. So it was a kind of very peculiar for her to go back to an event, as I say, the late 80s, which is, that's more than 35 years ago. So, you have to be already of a certain age to have any recollection of the case of the Central Park Five. And then, let alone going back to his father's problems with the Nixon Justice Department. It would be kind of amusing to bring that up because, of course, Nixon is kind of this demonized figure among American liberals and American Democratic Party. You say, well, yeah, it was the Nixon Justice Department. Not Nixon, obviously, not himself, but it was Nixon. It was run by John Mitchell. John Mitchell was then embroiled in Watergate, but it was John Mitchell's Justice Department that went after Fred Trump. So she brought all this rubbish up. But my point is that her strategy was very similar to Harris and to Biden, was just to keep attacking, attack. She had no positive program, no agenda of her own. She had no vision of her own. She had no ideas of her own. All she had was this series of attacks. Every single question, she kind of gave a kind of a mumbling answer, which didn't mean anything, and then she segued into an attack on Trump. Now, that was obviously a strategy. That was David Plouffe and the rest of them. That's to say, yeah, well, that's what you need to do. And of course, the media, this was catnip to the media, because, oh, great, that's exactly what I want. Yeah, you go, girl, you get him. You call him a racist, a fascist, a Putin lover, and everything. Yeah, that's it. That's the way to win an election. But the point is, of course, that it isn't the way to win an election, and that's why I think that as the days, since we get further and further away from the debate, I think it's going to work against Harris, because Harris failed to set out any vision of her own. I mean, she just didn't have any kind of a program, any kind of a plan, any policies. She really wasn't associated with anything. I mean, that's again partly a function of the bizarre process why she was just simply dumped in place of Biden. Naturally, that's not an issue that came up during the debate, even though it's a far more salient issue than what happened on January the 6th. I mean, how the hell is it that somebody who got 14 million votes was just pushed out, and somebody who got no votes and who did disastrously the one time that she ran, how is she in that position? So any fair debate would ask that question: what are you doing here? Why are you here? How did you get this onto this stage? I mean, so but no, of course not. They would have to talk about January the 6th, and of course abortion, everything that played to her strength. But the crucial question is, well, why is she here? And so but that was the part of the process. But even having got herself into this position, she's unable really to articulate anything other than a constant, these barrage of attack after attack after attack on Trump. All the terrible things that Trump is. And I think that that's what her advisors thought. Well, that's the best way to persuade the the not sure, the undecideds. But I'm not sure that that's the case. I think that the undecideds would be looking for. I mean, I don't think there are that many undecideds, to be honest. But the undecideds would want somebody to articulate a reason why he or she should be president. We got the point. You're not Donald Trump. You hate Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is a terrible person. Yeah, we got that. But why should you be president? What have you done to deserve that? What policies? And just to come up with a lot of policy wonk stuff. Oh, I'm going to give a child tax credit or whatever. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. Anyone can just cobble together, 10 policy wonk stuff. You just do a quick Google search, and and then you come up with some, here's my plan for education or whatever. That's nothing. You got to show what it is that you now believe. She couldn't do that. So when they said, well, these were your positions, you can't just turn around and say, yeah, I know they were my positions 4 years ago, but they're not my positions now. Oh, well, that's good. Okay, that's fine. Let's just move on. So that just isn't enough. And I think that's why I think this debate was not a good debate for her. And that the pundits who are declaring, oh, she won. Won what exactly? I mean, it's like, where's, what did she do to persuade the undecideds to vote for you? What did you do? In what way did you make a case for yourself? And to say, oh, Dick Cheney is for me, Liz Cheney is for me, John Bolton is for me. Well, I don't think anyone's going to be buying that, and I think there may well be Democrats who might just sit this one out. I mean, you really, you got Dick Cheney supporting you. You got who is it today? Alberto Gonzales. That's a name from the past. He was the Attorney General under George W. Bush. So Gonzales has said, yeah, I'm supporting Kamala. And doubtless, George W. Bush will at some point weigh in and say, yeah, I'm for Kamala. And Jeb will say, yeah, I'm for Kamala. But I don't think those are endorsements really that will get you very far. These are completely discredited figures. And I just don't think that there are too many Bush Republicans or Bush Democrats or who say, well, that's it. Well, you've got Bush behind you. I'm with you. So that's why I think that I mean the media I think are going to try and push these polls. They can't. They're already getting breathless. So by the time of this weekend, they'll be breathlessly touting the new polls that show Harris now 5 points ahead. But I think that even if she is 5 points ahead this weekend, I think that's going to evaporate quite quickly. I think it's going to be a very, very superficial bump, and then we'll be back to neck and neck. And as I said the other day, I think neck and neck is not good for the Democrats. I mean, that's just, we saw Hillary Clinton. She got, was it 3.5% more, higher percentage of the national vote than Trump. But that wasn't enough for her to win the electoral college. Biden, I think, got 4.5% more on the national vote, and he barely scraped through in the election. So if it's neck and neck, I think that's very bad news for her. So just, my feeling is there's going to be there's going to be a lot of cheating. No question, there's going to be all the mail-ins and everything else. But Zuckerbucks has said that he's not going to do the the drop boxes this time. He said that was, he got a lot of bad flack as a result of the drop boxes last time. He said he's not going to fund any more of these drop boxes. So that's not going to be good for the Democrats. Anyway, let's take a look at some of the comments and questions. So let's go to our locals page and see what people are saying on locals. And Stone River, welcome. Thank you very much for your generosity. And Stone River says, the debate moderators seem to be curiously incurious about Trump's warning of a possible slide into World War III. You're absolutely correct. They were indeed incurious. And he brought that issue up because, of course, the Ukraine came up, and Harris was, of course, we'll continue. We're standing up for international law and sovereignty, territorial integrity, blah blah blah. And then you had the moderator who asked twice, "Do you want Ukraine to win?" It was a very bizarre question. First of all, it was a bizarre question because Trump is running for president of the United States. He's not running for president of Ukraine. So, he doesn't need to answer the question whether he wants Ukraine to win. He wants the United States to win. He wants, theoretically, as president of the United States, you want what's best for the United States. You're not, Ukraine is not really your bailiwick. So that was a very peculiar question. But then what was even more peculiar was that he repeated the question. Trump had already given an answer when he said that I want this war to come to an end. So he said, no, I want Ukraine to win. No, I want this war to end. And then he asked again. Now, why would you ask again? I mean, he's already given you an answer. He gave you a very explicit answer. Do you want Ukraine to win? I want this war to end. It's exactly the same answer that he had given to Caitlin Collins when she hosted that CNN town hall. He said exactly the same thing. So he brings this up, no doubt, hoping that this will be a kind of a negative for Trump, and then Harris can use that against Trump, in the debate or subsequently in ads and so on. But then this is the point that Stone River you're making, is that Trump said, apropos of Ukraine, because again, neither the moderate nor Harris seem to be thinking about, well, you're continuing with this policy as before. We just continue. We go down. You don't have a plan for victory. You don't have an end game. You don't have any. Some achievable goals that you can set out, so we'll just continue doing the same thing. And then Trump said, well, one thing you've got to keep in mind is that Russia is a nuclear superpower. So you're going to keep doing the same thing. Where do you think that ends? I mean, you're going to defeat Russia. Well, how does that happen? And so neither the moderator nor Harris did, and that goes for, again, the entire political media class, ever think about, well, if there's no end game here, how are you just planning to just go on escalating and fighting this war against Russia, which is a nuclear superpower? And since the United States is also a nuclear superpower, this is likely to lead to a confrontation between two nuclear superpowers. And that's something that we should think about. Not only is it something we should be thinking about, but that's the most important thing that the United States president should be thinking about. Not about abortion, because remember, the first question was about the economy, which really was Harris didn't even remotely answer, and started droning on about how she was came from middle class and she had a wonderful mother and whatnot. The second question was about abortion, which is not a federal issue. It's not a matter for a president. It's not an issue that the president needs to get himself involved in. But they spend a lot of time on abortion. But this is the one issue, the most important issue that a president has to deal with, which is war and peace, and particularly a war that could easily get into a nuclear exchange. And therefore the moderator should have been asking that very question. Should have asked Harris, hey, this policy of yours, you're planning on continuing on Biden's track. Don't you think there's a danger that we're going to end up in a nuclear war with Russia? Don't you think that's a kind of an issue? I mean, how are you planning on avoiding this war? I mean, what's your strategy for avoiding this? And and incidentally, we're getting closer and closer to it. We had this invasion of Kursk on August the 6th. What do you think of that? We should have asked, the moderator should have asked exactly that question. What do you think of that? Now, this invasion of Kursk was carried out using American military hardware. There may have been more American assistance. We don't know. It's quite likely there was more, a great deal more American assistance. It's very unlikely that Ukraine could have pulled off an invasion like that without active U.S. assistance with intelligence. And moreover, this invasion required lines of supply. You can't just simply send a force into Kursk. You need lines of supply to make sure that invading force is continually reinforced. So this line of supply goes all the way through to a NATO base, the NATO base in Poland. So in other words, the United States and NATO were actively involved in an invasion of Russia. Now, again, a proper moderator would have asked, hey, is that a good idea? Do you think that to be sponsoring and assisting an invasion of Russia, a nuclear superpower, is that a good idea? Is that a sound policy? He didn't ask that question because he obviously knows the answer. Yeah, it's a sound policy. It's a bloody good idea. Yeah, we should have invaded a long time ago. These moderators and the politicians, they're all in the same bubble. That's why to him, the most obvious question, well, do you want Ukraine to win? I mean, that's all the issue. Do you want Ukraine to win? I mean, and he suspected that Trump had other ideas beyond, the goal of Ukraine winning. So the most important question that you would ask a would-be president, in fact, a current vice president, is, did you and do you support this invasion of Kursk? And how do you think that's going to work out? And now, there are obviously these reports. So now the reports that the Americans, Keir Starmer, two-tier Keir, who was going to be in Washington on Friday, that two-tier Keir will be given authorization to use the Storm Shadow missile, or he will give the authorization to authorize Ukraine, because they already have the Storm Shadow missiles, to use the missiles to attack targets deep inside Russia. Up until now, the Americans have been vetoing the use of the Storm Shadow. And then, according to Politico, it seems like the Biden administration is also likely to sign off on the use of the ATACMS, again, long-range missiles inside Russia. Now, again, the whole idea that this is, they're giving Ukraine permission, and it's all about, all right, well, here it is, here are the missiles, use them how you want, it's just a load of garbage. These missiles cannot be used without American intelligence, American satellite imaging, American GPS technology. All of that is done by the Americans. So if the Ukrainians use these missiles, the Storm Shadows or the ATACMS, they are using it in conjunction with the Americans. The Americans are actually involved at every step of the way in the use of these missiles. Ukraine cannot use those missiles without getting detailed tactical intelligence from the Americans. So in other words, the Americans would be bombing Russia. That's where the Biden administration are heading. Americans would be bombing Russia. Now then, if you're a moderator of the debate, you say, hey, Madam Vice President, do you think it's a good idea for the United States to be bombing Russia? I mean, is that the program? Is that a good idea? I mean, don't you think the American people would be quite interested to learn whether that's administration policy? Do you intend to bomb Russia yourself? Is that part of the plan under a Harris administration? He didn't ask any of that question. Not at all. I mean, so Trump kind of said this about World War III, and no one took him up on it. And again, with all the idiot pundits, it's like yum boom, yeah, Trump, was rambling, Trump, he didn't say anything, what of a win, knockout blow from Harris. So he did the responsible thing, which is that a future president should be thinking about, hey, we might be on our way towards World War III with Russia. Don't you think that we should stop? No, because he's for Putin. He's just pro-Putin. This is the level of the trivia and the stupidity of our kind of political media class. So, Stone River, you say they seem curiously incurious. Yeah, curiously incurious. They didn't follow up on it. The most important thing that an American president has to be dealing with is precisely war, and particularly nuclear war, not goddamn abortion, which has nothing to do with a president. So, anyway, Denoki, welcome. And, Danaka says, do svidania, Captain effing obvious. What you going to do about it? New Putin on the potential use of Western long-range weapons against Russia. This would mean that NATO countries, the United States, and European nations are at war with Russia. Yeah, just as what I was saying. Yeah, that's what he said today. He was interviewed by a Russian reporter, and said, hey, well, it looks like these Storm Shadow missiles, the Americans are about to let the British give the go-ahead, and then, maybe there's these ATACMS missiles. And then Putin says, well, yeah, well, they will effectively be at war with Russia. I mean, it's obviously a very dangerous state of affairs. And that's, I mean, we just talked about the issue of playing around with World War III. The problem is, and we've talked about this before, that we've come to this point. Unfortunate point is that Russia has been very weak in responding. From the start, Russia has allowed NATO and the United States to take one step after another and to involve itself ever more deeply in Ukraine's war against Russia. Step by step. And at each point when we were expecting a strong Russian reaction, it didn't come. Now, remember, when you say we, I say, we Gagglers, obviously we were expecting a stronger reaction. But the most important thing is that NATO was expecting a stronger reaction. And when that reaction didn't come, then they went the next step. They said, okay, well, look, we thought Russia would react much more strongly. They didn't. So maybe we can just do a little bit more. Okay, well, what about the tanks? Yeah, let's send in the tanks. What about this? The HIMARS. Yeah, let's use the HIMARS. And so it went. Well, what about this attack on Crimea? Yeah, we'll attack Crimea. We'll attack the Crimean Bridge. So now we got this problem, which is that as I said, if as is likely now, Ukraine is going to use these long-range missiles to hit targets deep inside Russia, it will be NATO essentially firing these missiles. It will not be Ukraine, it'll be NATO firing these missiles. So now we're in the situation in which NATO is attacking Russia. NATO is bombing Russia. That's serious. Now, again, I think it's because Russia has been very weak, but it's still a very dangerous situation. We can't always assume that Russia will do nothing. Maybe Russia will again just simply do nothing. But at some point, something is going to happen. I mean, this cannot go on. You can't really have NATO attacking Russia, NATO then lying to the world and claiming that they're not a party to the conflict when they obviously are a party to the conflict. NATO is bombing Russia, and then Russia doesn't do anything about it. I mean, the simplest way to look at it is saying, well, how would the United States respond? What would the United States feel if Mexico were bombing targets inside the United States with open collusion with Russia or China? I don't think the United States would put up with it for very long. So, I mean, you're right to say, well, it's Captain effing obvious, but that's really the problem. I think that Russia's response has been weak. This has tempted NATO. And let's remember, everything NATO does is driven by their perception of Russia's weakness. I mean, why did NATO embark on this expansion almost from the moment Gorbachev dissolved the Soviet Union? The NATO expansion began in the early 1990s because Russia was weak. They could do it. Russia was weak. They said, well, there's nothing Russia can do about it. So they moved, and you got, of course, you have all the George Cannon who's saying, oh, well, this is very bad. This is very dangerous. Russia, Russia's not going to tolerate this. Or Jack Backlock saying this. But NATO's view was that, yeah, this is the time when we can do it. We're not going to sit around waiting for Russia to get strong, because if Russia gets strong, then we won't be able to expand NATO. So they moved very quickly in the early 1990s to begin NATO expansion. First NATO members 1999. So really no time at all. Already they brought them in, and then you had the second and third big NATO expansion. At each point, NATO justified what it was doing, not because there was any threat to Russia, but on the contrary, because there was no threat from Russia. It's because Russia was so weak, because Russia couldn't do anything to stop it. That's why NATO did it. So now, what's NATO doing? NATO is essentially bombing Russia, or on the brink of bombing Russia, or whatever, because it sees Russia as weak. It says, well, there's nothing Russia can do. Just as we thought all along, Russia is really weak. And that's where it gets very dangerous, because sooner or later, I would imagine, with or without Putin, Russia will respond. They can't not. I mean, if they intend to survive as a political entity in the world, they will have to respond. I mean, I think NATO isn't thinking that far. They're thinking, hey, well, Russia's so weak, we can just do whatever we want. And really, when you just think about this, how how NATO has moved. Remember, 1989, 1990. The Soviet Union had forces throughout Eastern Europe. The Soviet Union was occupying East Berlin. So the Soviet forces, they've all been pushed out. All of those former Soviet satellites that had been allies, military and political allies of the Soviet Union, they are now in the NATO camp, very hostile to Russia, but they're now in the NATO camp. So that's gone. And now NATO has gone even further. I mean, first of all, then of course they not just the Eastern European states were co-opted into NATO, but the three of the republics of the former USSR, the Baltic states, are members of NATO, and now we actually have NATO attacking targets in Russia. That's a big geopolitical transformation. I mean, that is just huge in no time at all. That's 1989. That's 35 years. In 35 years, just see the magnitude of the decline of Russia. And as I say, I mean, if this goes on, I think it's going to get a lot worse. That's why I think Russia will have to respond. I think it will have to respond strongly. I think it will have to, at some point, start attacking NATO countries, and basically just risk it. You have to then risk world war. Right? You call NATO's bluff. Are you ready to go to war? Okay, let's do it. I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. But if they don't do that, then I think the attacks on Russia will just simply escalate, and then Russia may just start to disintegrate. Because one part of Russia after another will say, well, we're not getting protected from Moscow. Well, if we're not getting protection from Moscow, then we need to go our own way. So if this goes on, if these attacks on Russia go on, then I think more and more people in Russia will just say, well, what's this doing for us? What's the Kremlin doing for us? It's not providing us with any security. So we're going. I mean, if we join the West in one way or another, at least we'll get protection. I mean, they're not going to attack us if we're part of the West. So I mean, we could well be facing a real existential problem for Russia, just in terms of its survival. Anyway, let's see. You're back. Okay, so then we'll. Danrock says, okay, the cats will be Trump's downfall. As soon as he said that, I switched it off. Even if it was true, it's a stupid subject and unimportant. Trump should have avoided this, made a mockery of the whole debate, world falling apart, and they end up talking about this. Well, I mean, as I say, I mean, I don't really agree with you, because I think, I mean, obviously, in terms of as an issue, yes, it's not about the world falling apart. It's not World War III. But it brings the issue of immigration into high relief. It's something people can relate to. You start talking about child tax credit or giving people, I don't know, first-time home buyers, whatever, $50,000 or whatever. I mean, nobody really knows, how does that work? How does that benefit me or whatever? And they might not even understand Ukraine. What the hell's that about? This is something people understand. Dogs and cats. People love their dogs and cats. And if they think that somebody is threatening their dogs and cats, they're going to get very emotional. And you say, hey, these illegal immigrants are eating your dogs and cats. Boom, they get that. So yeah, as an issue, you can say it's not important, but immigration, I think, is a very big issue. It's something that people do feel very strongly about, and rightly. And the pets, the threat to the pets, is something that brings the issue into high relief. Um, so it's a little like Boris Johnson. When you think about what happened to Johnson, why did Johnson end his career so ignominiously? He did something that people understood, which was they did these draconian lockdowns while he and his buddies were, enjoying themselves and having parties and drinking and basically absolving themselves of the very strictures that they had imposed on everyone else. So that was an issue everyone understood. They understand hypocrisy. They understand dishonesty. And they showed the people here, you're as leaders, you don't give a rat's ass about the public. You'll just carry on exactly the same way as before. You'll be partying, whoring, carousing around, but while pretending that when the cameras are on, you put your little mask on and, I got my mask on and everything. And, it just reinforced people's suspicions about their rulers. And that was the end for Johnson. I mean, that was, so you could say, oh, well, that was pretty trivial. He went to he went to some parties, but no, it just reinforced something fundamental, and that was it. It was simple, but it was the end of his political career, and I think that's why if you look at his dogs and cats, it just simply said, oh yeah, you want immigration, you have the problem with immigration. I mean, obviously, there are more serious things with immigrants. You have all these drunken drivers who kill someone, and but they're basically driving without a proper license, and those are obviously terrible incidents, and raping Americans and so on. But the notion that they're kidnapping dogs and cats and then cooking them and making soup out of them, then that's that I think is that causes some distress. So I think it's an issue that worked for Trump. The media, of course, bit on it because they say, "Oh, it's debunked." But it's something I think people will remember from this debate. There's nothing else to remember from the debate other than maybe Trump's "I'm talking" to Harris, which was a nice line. And it was clever of him to do that. So I'm talking, and then he again said to her, "Quiet, please." But other than the "I'm talking," I think the dogs and cats will be the one thing that will come out. But I mean, I see your point. I just don't think I agree with you. Anyway, Cynthia, always good to see you, Cynthia. See, I think you've seen that we're running the poll for the for next Monday's screening. I think it's your idea, Cynthia, with the Western perceptions of the Soviet Union, of Russia and Russians, and so we've got. I hope you've already voted. Anyway, Cynthia talks. Ferenc Molnár is perhaps remembered for the youth novel he wrote in 1906, The Paul Street Boys. Yes, Pál utcai fiúk, as it is in Hungarian. Yeah, that's right. It's basically about a gang of schoolboys in turn of the century Budapest who defended their playground, the Grund, from the red shirts, a team of other boys who want to occupy it. He also served as a war correspondent during World War I. Below is a photo of him covering the battlefront. As you can see, he was quite a handsome man. Yeah, no, that's one of the great works of Hungarian literature. This the Paul Street Boys. That's right. It's not my thing exactly, but yeah, definitely one of the great works of Hungarian literature. So there's the picture of Apple, and then you can see, like if you just look at his face, you think, well, that's probably someone who's not happy about being somebody else's supper. So again, I mean, the Twitter space is now inundated with these memes of dogs and cats, running away from Springfield. I mean, it's very funny, but it just shows that it did make an impact, that whole thing. So anyway, Marty, very good to see you. Thank you very much, Marty, for your generosity. And Judy, thank you so much for your generosity. And so Judy asked the question, says, Elon Musk's response to Taylor Swift's post-debate endorsement of Kamala, which she signed as childless cat lady, posted 46 a.m. Wednesday, September 11th. Fine, Taylor, you win. I will give you a child and guard your cats with my life. Yes, fine, you win. I'll give you a child and guard your cats with my life. What do you think that means? I mean, I will give you a child. What's he what do you think he's insinuating there? That he wants to impregnate her, or he's going to pass on one? He has many children, so is he planning on passing off one of his offspring on her? I don't know how many. He may have something like 12 children. Musk through I think several wives and girlfriends. And guard your cats with my life. I mean, I think I get the guard your cats with my life, but I wonder what exactly he means with I will give you a child. But that's a curious issue. And maybe Gagglers can weigh in because I'm not sure myself. How significant is Taylor Swift's endorsement? I mean, one never really knows with these celebrity endorsements whether how much anyone cares about that. But presumably, I mean, Taylor Swift has a following, especially among young women, and maybe that will redound to Kamala's benefit. But here I again I have to plead a certain cultural ignorance. Aren't Taylor Swift's fans quite conservative? I don't know. I mean, I just because I don't really know much about her music, but I thought that maybe they're not exactly very radical in their outlook, so they may not be that enamored of Kamala. But I'd be curious if people can weigh in how significant Taylor Swift's endorsement, because by now we're kind of familiar with movie stars. They're mostly liberal. It's like stands to reason. Yeah. I mean, George Clooney, is endorsing, the Democrat. Robert De Niro is endorsing the Democrat. We know all this. Tom Hanks and whatever. That's exactly what we would expect. So it's not. It doesn't matter one bit. But I'm just not sure exactly where Taylor Swift is in the pop culture, and whether her fans would necessarily follow her and say, oh, well, if Taylor Swift is for Kamala, I'm for that. Because I mean, these are sort of young women. I mean, I'm assuming in general that young single women are for Kamala. So I mean, I imagine that they're already in her corner. So I don't think they need Taylor Swift's endorsement to persuade them to go for her. But I just wonder also whether maybe she's she's culturally quite conservative. But I don't know. So I'm just curious what other people think on that. Lenz Larkis, thank you. I'm hearing mixed opinions equals no one who, in my humble opinion myself, I don't think the debates matter that much unless a candidate has a huge disaster. I think that's right. I think that the days of the debates mattering, are long gone. I don't know if they ever really mattered. I think that Gerald Ford, did that his famous blunder about there's no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe against Jimmy Carter. I don't think that's the reason Ford lost that election. I think it was always going to be a very hard election for him to win. After Watergate, the Nixon debacle, his own somewhat dubious standing as essentially he hadn't been elected to the presidency. So I think Ford was always going to have a hard time getting reelected, and in the end, it was a close election. So I don't know whether that disaster in that debate hurt him very much. In the 1980 election, I think that may have helped Reagan. Reagan Carter. They only had this one debate, and then Reagan had that famous line during the debate. He said, "There you go again," to Carter. It was like a bit of a put down to Carter. But what mattered for Reagan and Carter was that Reagan was thought to be out of his depth. I mean, no one really thought he was that smart. He was an actor, he was a charmer, but no one really thought that he could debate on issues of policy, that he could debate matters of national security. And Carter, whatever else he was, I mean, Carter was a wonk. I mean, he studied his briefing books. I mean, he was a hard worker. He mastered detail, and so everyone thought, well, this Carter's just going to wipe the floor with Reagan. Reagan just couldn't possibly match Carter's knowledge of the issues, and Reagan survived that. Reagan did pretty well in that debate. I mean, I don't know that he won the debate exactly, but by not losing, that was a great victory for him, and so the public was reassured that Reagan could do the job. He didn't make any mistakes, and yeah, he can argue with Carter, even if the extent of his knowledge was limited. So like that was a good. But otherwise, it's hard to know. I mean, if again going through history, when you think of the Reagan-Mondale debates of 1984, I mean, if you recall, the first debate was an absolute disaster for Reagan. I mean, he was just completely out of sorts. He was looking his age. He seemed very absent-minded. He was rambling, and there were real questions after that first debate whether Reagan can just continue because he just seemed so old. It's like, I mean, he was the Alzheimer's was beginning to kick in at that stage. May well have been triggered by the shooting in 1981, but he didn't look at all good in that first debate. But then Reagan kind of recovered, did okay in the second debate, and then of course went on to win a landslide. So I kind of agree with you that I don't think these debates matter that much unless you get a disaster. Or somebody gets a decisive win. So we talked the other day about the vice presidential debate in 1988 when Lloyd Bentsen landed that knockout blow on Dan Quayle, from which Dan Quayle never recovered. About Senator Jack Kennedy. He was well rehearsed. He knew Quayle would bring up Jack Kennedy, and he landed that blow, but Dukakis and Bentsen lost decisively in 1988, so it didn't make a bit of difference. So the again with the thing with Reagan, I mean with Trump rather, is that yeah, he's not a great debater, and the people who declare that he lost, they just don't like Trump. They don't like his demeanor. They don't like the way he talks. He's just not their person, So the people who watch these debates, the people who savor these zingers directed at him, they don't like Trump. They don't in any way relate to Trump. And that's why when they say, "Oh, Trump lost," you got to sort of, yeah, well, that's what you would say. You're always going to say, Trump lost. And so that this way doesn't. Now, one other thing one measure of the claims that somehow Harris won would be, okay, well, show us the moment in the debate where Harris really, landed a blow. Just give us that one moment when Harris made a devastating point. Harris really, humiliated Trump. She really made a very sharp comment or whatever. They can't do it. So that's why all the declarations that, oh, she won, she wiped the floor with him. You say, well, okay, well, give me an example. Show me one moment in that debate that in which Harris lands a blow on Trump. There isn't one. There really absolutely isn't one, because there was no real debate there. She spent her whole time attacking him. That's all she did. To every question, she really didn't answer the question. She just went off in a tirade against him. And as I said earlier, the people who say, yeah, she won, they love these attacks. Great, bring up the Central Park Five, fantastic. Bring up Putin, fantastic. But where's the knockout bill? Where's the Senator, Jack Kennedy? Where's the there's no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, or some moment when you can say, boy, that was the blow that sent Trump reeling. There isn't. So this is really a fraud. As always, the media are perpetrating a fraud by telling the public, Harris won. You have to understand, Harris won. Harris won. Keep repeating, Harris won. She wiped the floor with Trump. It didn't happen. Just like the fairy tales about the Harris momentum, the Harris juggernaut. She's there's enthusiasm, real enthusiasm within the Democratic Party for Harris. It's a fraud. It's a typical media fraud. So that's why when you say no one won, I agree. I mean, obviously I say, Trump didn't do particularly well, but he never does well. He's not a debater. That's just not who he is. He never really trained as a debater. He has no interest in debating. So he, in every debate he does the same thing, which is he kind of rambles, makes some points, and then goes off on a tangent and talks about something else. I mean, that's always the way he's been. Maybe he did more of that than usual on Tuesday, but she didn't use that opportunity to present an agenda of her own, and that was really what she needed to do. Because as people say, she needs to reintroduce herself to the public. That was the consensus view. Harris, this is the opportunity for Harris to reintroduce herself to the American public. Well, she didn't do that. I mean, if that was the consensus, then notice how everyone just forgot that was the consensus going into the debate. She needs to reintroduce herself to the public. That's been forgotten. It's the enthusiasm, because she didn't do that. All she did was attack Trump. So she made the whole thing about Trump, even though she had been vice president for the past 3.5 years. So why are we talking about Trump? But to reintroduce herself means, well, this is what I'm going to do as president. These are the things I believe in. These are the policies that I want to pursue. But she didn't do that. She just said, I hate Trump. So I don't think she acquitted herself at all well. And as I say, I think the polls will reflect that. She may get a small bump by this weekend. I don't think that it'll last. Lenz Lark says 99% of opinion on the debate is, I don't like X, so X lost. Yeah, I agree with that. That's unfortunate that most people think like that. I like so and so I think he won. I don't like so and so I think he lost. That's always the way. Steve Brown says Central Park 5 is more obscure than school busing. I agree. Again, school busing, when you bring that up, nobody now knows what the hell school busing was. But again, the school busing that goes back to the 1970s, at the time when the Justice Department was going after Fred Trump for basically not renting out property to blacks. So the school busing is part of that era where you kind of force integration. You can't just have white schools and black schools. You got to actually force the people to be together. And of course, school busing was absolutely hated, and led to serious violence and confrontation. But now it's kind of largely forgotten. And as Steve Brown says, Harris was a Cali prosecutor, a toxic, and in her environment. Yeah, no, that's right. Let's see. Where? So there was a question which I wanted to. Let me go back. Okay. Let's go back to this. There was something. There was a question I wanted to address. So let me go back. Okay, yeah. So Cynthia, yeah, I wanted to. So hold on, just first of all, before I talk to Cynthia, the essay Delandom says George is systematically evading the most urgent question. That's like me. What is worth of De Palma's blowout, 1981? All credit for Hugh for provoking this potentially essential decomposition of the film. I was never very keen on De Palma's oeuvre. Because I thought it was always cribbing from other filmmakers. I mean, it was obviously cribbing from Hitchcock, and then of course, Blowout was cribbing from Antonioni's Blow Up. So I've just never really taken to De Palma. I haven't seen anything of De Palma's that I thought highly of. And again, maybe people correct me and say, "Oh, I don't understand his artistic vision." But to me, it's like I'm just not interested in filmmakers always cribbing from other filmmakers, riffing on other filmmakers. So, and the same goes for Quentin Tarantino. I don't know. It's just not my thing when filmmakers do that. So, I mean, maybe I'll take another look at Blowout. As I said, when I saw it, I didn't think much of it, but I'm ready to take another look at it. But in comparison with The Master, Antonioni, and Blow Up, I didn't think didn't think much of that. Anyway, Cynthia says, not to sound like I'm being overly biased or trying to sway you in any way, but I really do hope Billy Wilder's 1, 2, 3 gets first place in the upcoming movie poll. There are some awfully amazing things that I just discovered about the film, but perhaps the most amazing thing about it has to do with the title. As you may know, it's based on the 1929 Hungarian. Oh, that's right. Okay. 1929 Hungarian one-act play with the same title, Et Kettő Három, by Ferenc Molnár. Okay. I don't know that play, but that's interesting. It's funny. I didn't know that. I should have, but I didn't know that, because I always thought that the reason it's called 1, 2, 3 is that throughout the film, the sort of the Jimmy Cagney character, who's this big Coca-Cola executive in West Berlin. I mean, the wall hadn't yet been built; it was just on the brink of getting built. But so he's living in West Berlin, in the Western occupied zone, is that he had this tendency of ordering everyone around. He said 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that's how I always assumed that was the title. That's where the title comes from. So I didn't realize that the title comes from Ferenc Molnar. That's really interesting. I'm gonna look this up after this this podcast. I'm definitely gonna look that up and see in what way it's based on Molnar. So Cynthia goes on. Yet I still don't have any clue as to what's meant by the phrase 1, 2, 3 until I learned that the 1929 play is also about a businessman who takes on the task of turning a poor, unkempt socialist into a rich, well-groomed capitalist. Huh. That's really interesting. Because in the film, the Jimmy Cagney character has to turn this East German who was basically dyed-in-the-wool communist, a very young man, dyed-in-the-wool communist. He has to make him into a capitalist because his boss, his boss had entrusted Cagney to look after his daughter. So the daughter is living with Cagney and his wife, and then the daughter gets impregnated by this young East German communist, and then of course, he's terrified of what the boss is going to do to him when he finds out that not only is his daughter pregnant, but she's pregnant with a communist. So he has to do a lot of very quick juggling to turn this East German communist into a perfect son-in-law for his boss. But I really didn't know that was the origin of that was Molnar. And he's having to do this task so swiftly that it almost seems like magic, much like how a magician does when he lifts up his wand and shouts out 1, 2, 3, abracadabra, and voila, the miracle appears before your eyes. Yeah, I did not know. I always thought that it's because Cagney had that way of speaking 1, 2, 3, and you had that whole thing about he would give out these instructions to his subordinates. 1, do this, 2, do that, 3, do this. So get on the phone to Mayor Willy Brandt, because Willy Brandt was then the mayor of Berlin, and then get on the phone to Chet Huntley. Oh, Huntley's not in the office. Okay, well then get Brinkley. And that was the thing. It was just very funny with this 1, 2, 3. But I didn't know that was the etiquette to harem. Okay, all right. This is why it's so crucial to have Cynthia here, because she's this amazing expert on cinema. She's always providing so much fascinating information, and that's why it's so important to attend these Monday night screenings, because you not only watch good films, we only select good films, but you get the benefit of Cynthia's background information and encyclopedic knowledge. It's like I'm always learning things. I like this. It's embarrassing, but I didn't know this about Molnar's play. So thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you again for your generosity. And then Essie Delundum says, maybe it's a good cop, bad cop. Vance denounces the childless cat ladies and Trump rushes into their defense. Well, is he? Well, he's not really defending the cat ladies. I mean, he's defending the cats. I mean, Vance did say that when he was confronted about the childless cat ladies, and he said, "Yeah, I'm sorry about what I said. I don't like to be mean to cats." So he said something like that. So it was very funny. But I think this whole meme. I know not everyone agrees with me, but I think this whole meme of the cats, rescuing the cats, and that Trump's policy is to save the cats, particularly the cats of Ohio. I think it's just going to be very funny, just a funny meme. Anyway, Essie then says, what if it turned out that the Haitians were cultivating a stock of geese to make foie gras? Huh. Well, that's a very interesting insight. But do you really think that they know how to make foie gras? That requires a lot of skill. Um, and I think I don't know exactly the status of the making of foie gras, but it used to be that they stuffed the geese, boom, boom, boom. They keep stuffing the goose until the goose's liver bursts, and then that's the moment the foie gras is ready. When the liver bursts, so they keep just stuffing the goose. But it was very cruel, and I think the French ended it some time ago because of the obvious cruelty to geese. But I think some French still do it. I can't believe that there aren't um, authentic, genuine French farmers who don't make authentic, genuine foie gras by stuffing a goose's beak until the liver bursts. Um, Foie gras is really very nice, by the way. Um, um, and then Richard Phillips says, why is it racist to say that bumpkins from the third world might eat local wildlife? Do liberals think that everyone in the world has the same taboos? To a person from the third world, a goose in a park is food. I kind of agree with you on that. I think that if you're hungry, then you'll see a goose in the park, which is to others think, well, this is what makes our city beautiful. We have a park, we have a lake in the park, and we have beautiful geese swimming or ducks swimming in the park. It all adds to the beauty of our city. And somebody else says, hey, well, that's a tasty looking goose. Why don't I just grab it? But that's really the problem with immigration. That of course you are bringing in a lot of people into whether it's Europe, the United States, or whatever, who don't have the same values. And I mean, obviously, the case of the pets is an obvious one, but most seriously is attitudes towards women, because much of the rest of the world, I mean, people don't have the same attitudes towards women, and that's why particularly when they come to Europe or United States and they see young women wandering around unaccompanied by anyone, often very lightly dressed. They think, hey, this is a help yourself country. So there's this constant sexual assault, and that this is a real problem throughout Europe. Women complaining that they just can't walk the streets anymore because they're always being ogled and and attacked by immigrants. So again, it's people coming in with very different uh, attitudes. So the answer to that is you want to basically restrict immigration. It's just not a great idea, and particularly when it's immigration from parts of the world which have very little in common with our parts of the world. So anyway, Marty, always good to see you. Thank you. And then we have let's see. Hugh Keenan says George sees our chat as a poop stain on the carpet of life. Well, I don't think I do that. I mean, boy, you have a dark view of me. I definitely don't see the chat as a poop stain on the carpet of life. But I mean, it's beautifully expressed, but I definitely don't think that. I'm surprised you. That's how you see me, but no, I definitely don't think that. And where are we? So Batman says Batman now Batman. Okay. So yeah, Batman now Batman. Yes, says Trump is far more democratic than anyone before him, and he thinks for America he isn't someone who can be used as a puppet to start new military conflicts like Ukraine. So old thugs makes dollars. Yeah, I mean, I think that he ultimately is interested in peace. I mean, for various reasons, he didn't achieve it. He didn't start any new wars. I think that's true. He didn't achieve American withdrawal as he had hoped during his first term. And I think, well, obviously he had resistance within the deep state, but I think he was also conflicted. I think, he wants to be the tough guy, the guy that everyone's afraid of, but he also wants to be the peacemaker, the man who sort of brings peace to the world. He had difficulties combining the two, so he went from one to the other without really settling for any one of those, and that's why I think his first term really wasn't a success. He could have, had he been ruthless enough and defied the deep state, which you can do, he would have withdrawn from Syria and he would have withdrawn from Afghanistan. I mean, he didn't do that, and he allowed himself to be derailed. But I think because of his ultimate uncertainty as to what kind of a president he wanted to be, whether he wants to be the tough guy, which the way he described himself. Well, this is what Viktor Orban said. I'm someone everyone's afraid of, or he wants to be the great peacemaker. Getting people around the table and signing documents. So, but he's infinitely preferable to Harris, because Harris doesn't even have any ideas. I mean, Harris just wants to be president. I mean, that's all. I mean, it's like, that's really the problem with her. The problem with Hillary Clinton is that they just want that job. Like, they don't have any idea what they want to do. They just want that job. I want that job. And that's why, she will be absolutely a pliable tool of the military-industrial complex, the militarists. She'll do everything that they want. She, absolutely sign off on everything. Essie says, I thought Trump said that if she does, they should be executed. Ed Koch controlled the city. Was Ed Koch mayor then? Yeah, maybe. I don't remember. Ed Koch, he was mayor up until 1990. So I guess Ed Koch was still mayor then. Okay. Control the city, a Democrat, so why blame Trump? He just believed what they told him. Yeah, I agree. I had nothing to do with Trump. I mean, Trump was just a real estate man. I mean, that he took out a full-page ad in the New York Times. I mean, who cares? I mean, he wasn't mayor. He wasn't a police official. As I say, he was just a kind of an opportunist who saw that this was a cause célèbre in New York for a while. I mean, all the tabloids were writing about this nonstop, and everyone was very upset about this. And he battened onto it, but it had nothing to do with him. So what the heck? Why even bring this up? Well, again, something that happened, more than 30 years ago. Anyway, I thought. So Psinuk, nice to see you. Psinuk says, thanks for all the content. You are right. Trump made a strategic mistake debating Biden early in June. Yeah, he should have waited until he was the official nominee. The debate was a disaster. Did Trump really have Matt Gaetz prep him? Not a good choice, in my opinion. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, who prepped him? Trump is not someone who does what people advise him to do. I think he is a CEO. He has the mentality of a CEO, and everyone is a subordinate. So if somebody comes to him and say, "Well, I think this is the way you should go," he might listen or he might not listen. I mean, as I say, I don't think the debate was that bad for him. I mean, disaster, I think, is a little strong. I don't think it was a good debate. I don't think it wasn't a good night for him, because there were all sorts of opportunities that he had to put really hit her hard. in a way, had she been up against J.D. Vance, I think Vance would have dealt with her very efficiently and very effectively. I think he didn't. He allowed her to make the debate about himself. He should have set out right from the start. This debate isn't about me. This debate is about the future. But somehow he allowed Harris to dictate the terms of the debate. So I think that was a weakness on his part. But the thing was that he got roped into this, and I think that's inexcusable, whether it's he or his campaign staff. And you ultimately you have to rely on campaign staff. I mean, they're the ones who are organizing things like debates and events and so on. And when the Democrats came to them and say, hey, well, why don't we do these two debates, one in June and then one in September? This was, this should have been a red flag for his campaign staff. And, for him, okay, you want to say blame it on him, but it should have been a red flag as to, well, why are the Democrats suddenly pushing for these debates? I mean, Biden had wanted to avoid debates like the plague. I mean, he had no debates on his way to the nomination, and made sure he'd have no debate against Kennedy, or against Jill Stein, or anyone. Well, whoever. I think she wasn't running on the Democratic Party, but I'm not thinking about her. Marianne Williamson, and what was it? Cornel West. So so he didn't want to make sure he didn't debate them. And then so suddenly, if the Democrats say, yeah, why don't we have a debate? And for his campaign staff and for him just to agree like that is just bizarre. Because they could have either said, well, let's wait for it. Let's wait until after the nominations are done, and they basically, the two parties have selected their candidates, and they can sit down for a debate. And that's the way it's done. It's only the debates are scheduled when the parties have selected their nominees. Now, in this case, they rushed in, and there was really very questionable whether you can have a debate, because neither Trump nor Biden was the nominee of the party at that stage. So it was always a setup, and it was very foolish for Trump and his team to agree to this. And it was clearly done with a view to elbowing out Biden. Had he waited a little bit, then Biden would have would have been locked in as the nominee, and then the Democrats wouldn't have been able to do anything. Once the party had made its choice at the convention, then it would have been impossible to ease him out. So that's what the Democrats were playing, and Trump's team just fell into the trap. And then the other thing is the selection of the venues. Now, why do these networks get to determine the shape of a debate? Why is that? Why give it to CNN? Why give it to ABC or Fox News or anyone? I mean, why? What's the basis for it? I mean, at least you used to have what is the League of Women Voters? I said the other day it was the Daughters of the American Revolution, and that's the League of Women Voters. And then after that, it was the Commission on Presidential Debates. But at least they sat down and they figured out the terms of the debate. But now you just go to the networks and say, hey, well, you host it, you organize it, you set the rules. I mean, why do they get to do it? Why should they make money? I mean, they make a lot of money on these debates. Why should they be allowed to make so much money? What have they done to deserve making all this money? But they agree to it, and then they agree to the networks setting these rules. And then the networks don't even bother following the rules. I mean, having first set these rules, which is the microphones are muted while somebody else is speaking, there'll be no fact checks during the debate, they violated their own rules. So it's bad enough that they give them these debates to host. It's bad enough they allow them to set their rules, but then they don't even follow their rules. And then you have to think, well, when are these people, when are the Republicans ever going to learn that you just can't give these things to the networks who just don't like you? I mean, you don't remember what happened to Romney. I mean, Romney is an awful character, but what happened with Romney and Candace Crowley was a disgrace, and everyone knew it was a disgrace, and that was in 2012. Then she interrupted. She was the moderator. She had no business interrupting. She had no business fact checking Romney, and then getting it wrong. I mean, it's just as the other night, the fact checks, every single fact check was wrong. One after another, about the fact check on the abortion, and the fact check about the Ohio and the cats, the crime. That crime is down. I mean, these are all wrong. Fact checks were all wrong. They had no business intervening in this debate. And then it happened, and then you think, is anyone going to learn anything from it? And they say, no, they're not going to learn. 4 years time, 4 years time, when they have again the debates, who's going to host it? CNN, ABC, NBC. That's the same thing. No one bothers to learn anything because I guess the Republicans are just pathetic, contemptible and pathetic. They just don't stand for anything. And they just accept conditions that they know are going to be detrimental to them, but they just okay, fine, yeah, great, we'll have it on NBC. Anyway, that was so typical. But but Matt Gaetz, look, Matt Gaetz is not a bad debater. I mean, he if you watch him, he's a pretty good debater, but that's Matt Gaetz. I mean, that's not Trump. Matt Gaetz has been in politics. He was a lawyer and everything. He's been doing this all his life. Trump is a CEO. He's not used to debating with anyone, and he hasn't bothered to learn. He hasn't bothered to learn the art of debate. That's just who he is. He just doesn't bother to learn. He probably should have learned, but he just couldn't be bothered. And again, as I say, I don't think it was that bad for him, but he could have done better. I mean, without question. Lenslark says that Harris, the far left hates Harris. She was a highly aggressive prosecutor, certainly no friend of the blacks, jailed weed users. I think that is all correct. But if it comes down to Harris versus Trump, they'll still go for Harris. So there'll be members on the left who will not be happy with her. But once that argument will be made, well, if you don't vote for her, then you're essentially voting for Trump. I think they'll all rally around, and that's why she figures that she can move to the right, and she's been moving quite drastically to the right in this election. She can move to the right without losing any votes on the left, because Trump is so hated among Democrats that no matter how far right she moves, they'll still vote for her, because otherwise it'll be a vote for Trump. I think that's her calculation. I suspect that's probably right. And then Steve Brown says, now Richard Phillips says, George looks like a posh English golfer. They wear sweaters like that. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's right. Yes, I always like those golfers. When they stroll around on the golf course wearing these very interesting sweaters and those great pants that they wear. Thank you. And Steve Brown says, if I must look at one or the other for 4 years, I'll take Putin's lapdog. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think she's awful to look at, and the smirking and the grimacing and the laughing and the pointing fingers. It's so unpalatable. It's so execrable that it's just I couldn't take that. I mean, Hillary Clinton was, again, you just can't take that. Imagine you have to look at that for 4 years, have to listen to that grating voice for 4 years. No, you can't do that. And with Harris, you have that nasal voice. I mean, she just talks through her nose, and it's just horrible just to listen to that. So yeah, no question. In every way, not just in terms of physical appearance, but in every way. Trump is more, whatever his defects, I mean, Trump is more acceptable than Harris is. But, I can't be sure that he'll win. So, and, she could well end up winning this election. And, and then you say, well, Americans have to be punished. That's what happens. I mean, if you vote in such a stupid way, then you've got to be punished. Like the British people are now being punished for voting for Starmer. And they're going to be punished for at least 4 years for having voted for Starmer. They're going to keep beaten over the head again and again and again. Well, this is what you do. And that's what's going to happen if they vote for Harris. Don't come and complain afterwards. Oh, she's taking our guns away or whatever. Oh, she's cracking down on free speech. No, I mean, that was all baked in. You knew that this is what she was going to do. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, we definitely could have her for another 4 years. Hugh Keenan says Megyn Kelly's reaction to the debate was funny. She did very good. She did a good. Goonies 1972 says, can we talk about something relevant now, like Putin's speech at the Eastern Economic Forum? We talked a bit about that on Tuesday. I talked a bit about that, his speech at the Vladivostok Economic Forum. So you could, I don't know if you were here on Tuesday, but I did talk about that. Steve Brown says the question of Ukraine was just to show bona fides, either whether Trump sides with the vile empire on the issue or not. That's all. Yeah, I agree. And then Sinok says, if he waited until August, it would have been a lot more difficult to get rid of Biden if he was already the official candidate, giving Harris less time and more obstacles to become the nominee. I agree. That's why they should never have agreed to an early debate. So these two debates have turned out to be an absolute fiasco for Trump. First of all, it allowed the Democrats to get rid of Biden, gave them plenty of time to prepare Harris for the Democratic convention. And then you had a debate under the auspices of ABC News, which hates Trump. They're involved in the litigation against Trump. Trump sued them over Stephanopoulos' claim on live TV that Trump was convicted of rape. So they're suing ABC News. So there's a litigation there. And then the president of ABC News is friends with Harris. So it was a format that favored Harris. So you agree to these debates, so it turned out to be an absolute boon for the Democrats. I mean, you can't just go into these negotiations and get your clock cleaned in this way. I mean, not if you want to have anyone respecting you. Steve Brown says, yes, Biden was set up to fail by the DNC. Then they did the same for Trump by baiting Trump into the Disney debate. Yeah, that's right. Recall Disney or Illuminati family. Yeah, but as I say, the president of ABC News is a friend of Harris. In fact, I mean, I read somewhere that he, facilitated the meeting between Harris and her husband. Forgotten the husband's name. Not a very distinguished. So he, he's the kind of, he's a close friend of Harris. There's obviously a conflict of interest there. As Steve Brown says, the U.S. pathetic Albion UK missile strike inside Russia. Then Russia must take the gloves off and strike the West hard. Yeah, there you have. And then Hezbollah says, and then Steve Brown says, use the Hezbollah tactic of striking only military target My first target would be the Doha station in Qatar. I wonder if Qatar knows that. Okay, and then so I wanted to look at something. And then Steve Brown says the NATO expanded when it should have been disbanded. Yeah, that's right. Yes, to expand instead illustrates the neocon deep state thought process succinctly. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, Judy, thank you very much, Judy. So Judy says, Russia has threatened tactical nukes against the UK. AP covered the story in May. Moscow interpreted that as a threat. David Cameron's comment that Ukraine could use British long-range weapons, such as the Storm Shadow missile, to hit back at Russia. That prompted Russia to announce it would hold drills involving tactical nuclear weapons. Russia also warned the UK government that its decision could bring retaliatory strikes on British military facilities and equipment on Ukrainian soil or elsewhere. No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, if Russia retaliates, I don't think they go to. I mean, I think the first step of any Russian retaliation beyond the borders of Ukraine. I mean, if they do take the gloves off, if let's say the first step, the Storm Shadow strikes deep inside Russia. So the first step, I think, would be NATO territory closer to Ukraine. I don't think they're going to go for attacking Britain. I think that not as a first step. I think, again, I don't think they're going to go for a nuclear strike right away. I think and you don't need to do that. I mean, I think that if you just strike military bases in Poland, that already is a warning sign, because you say, okay, well, we've now struck military bases, logistics bases in Poland. You've made the first step towards war, and then you're throwing it upon NATO to say, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? Now, NATO would probably then say, hey, we're not a party to the conflict. This is this is an unprovoked attack on NATO territory, and Article 5 must go into effect. I don't think that argument, I think NATO will make that argument, but I don't think it'll have much resonance, because it's so obvious that NATO is a party to the conflict. I mean, you can't keep making this argument, and particularly given the coverage that's now been given of these Storm Shadow missiles and all the discussions about the use of the Storm Shadow missiles. You can't now keep saying we're not a party to the conflict. Well, of course you're a party to the conflict, because they cannot be used by Ukrainians. They can only be used by NATO. So I think the first step would not be, I don't think the Russians would resort to nuclear weapons right away, whatever, tactical nuclear weapons, whatever. I think the first step would be to hit targets in Poland, and to make clear that Russia is ready to escalate and to confront NATO. And then and then we'll see how NATO responds. I don't know how NATO would respond. I would doubt that there would be much appetite within NATO to start invoking Article 5, and effectively everyone is going to war against Russia. I mean, it could happen, but I think that's that's quite a stretch. Look at the opinions within Germany. I mean, look at the opinions within France. I don't think at the moment that there's much of an appetite for war with Russia. I may be wrong. I mean, who knows? It might just escalate and escalate. But I think that the first step will be strikes outside of Ukraine, because Russia has not struck anyone outside of Ukraine. It's limited itself entirely to strikes within Ukraine. So, the next step, I think, is to start striking. And I think Poland is obviously, you have to hit Poland. I mean, Poland has been the key, the hub for transporting weapon systems into Ukraine, so that you have to hit Poland. And then lay it on the line for NATO, and you say, okay, are you ready? Up until now, NATO has been in the catbird seat because it's very nice for them. Hey, they can keep escalating, and they look at Russia and say Russia is reluctant to escalate, so let's escalate some more. Let's just take one more step, and nothing happens. And now, for the first time, Russia will hit NATO territory, and then we'll see. Are you ready to invoke Article 5? Are you ready? Everybody goes to war. I have my doubts, but that you have to do that. You have ultimately to bring this war to an end. I mean, otherwise there's no prospect of this war ever coming to an end, because whatever progress Russia makes in Donetsk, let's take Pokrovsk. Oh, great, we've got Pokrovsk, and then Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, and it just goes on and on and on through the end of year into next year, and they say, oh, we've taken the whole of Donetsk. Well, it doesn't matter if Ukraine, and that means NATO, can just keep hitting you day after day, whether it's through drones or with missile strikes or whatever. You basically don't have any peace at all. It means essentially they can just go on attacking you all the time. So the issue of sort of winning a village here and a village there in Donetsk will matter much less than the fact that you can just keep attacking Russian territory at will. So that's why I think that Russia's best bet, if it kind of wants to bring this thing to an end, is I think to raise the stakes and see, to tell NATO, okay, you want to go forward with this? You want to really escalate to world war? Okay, fine. Let's do it. You want to go to war for Ukraine? You want to risk your countries, the destruction of your countries for Ukraine? Okay, let's do it. I think that's the only real way that this war can be brought to any kind of an end anytime soon. Otherwise, it's just going to go on. I mean, because NATO is not going to just let it go. They're just going to keep attacking and attacking and attacking Russia, and including, incidentally, invasions and seizures of Russian or Belarusian territory. Anyway, thank you so much, Judy, for your generosity. Let's see. And R. Brown says the cat's comment by Trump will draw attention to the fact that 20,000 Haitians were dumped into a town of 60,000. I agree with that. It was a meme to open the door to a voter willing to check it out and see the reality of the border crisis. Time will tell. I agree entirely. I think that's the thing, that, if it turns out that even one cat was killed, one cat was eaten, that's enough. That's it. You made the case. You don't need 10 cats or 10 dogs or whatever. Just one cat, and you've made the case. And therefore, you've shown the media with their stupid fact checks to be duds. So you just have it focuses the mind on the fact that you've got a massive migrants who have been dumped on people who don't want them there. I mean, as I said, I think that the fact that they've, stolen and eaten geese from the park, which has been established, that's not something that's been debunked. That's bad enough. People want geese in the park because they're very beautiful. People want to have nice, beautiful parks where they can take their children, and then somebody comes along and takes a goose and cooks it. That's just not nice. So I think that's enough. That's already enough, for a town to say we don't want any more migrants here. Peter S. says, what does Hungarian George think of the films of Bela Tar? I'm not a great fan of Hungarian cinema. I really find it dreary and depressing, and to be honest, just unwatchable. I always have. There was a time when Hungarians used to make quite entertaining comedies. That was a long time ago. But really, anything that's beyond the comedies, I just can't take. Hungarians are a kind of a notoriously depressing people. They are depressives. They always have been. Used to have the highest suicide rate in the world. They've lost the number one spot. They used to be the number one suicide nation, but they're only about number 7 now. So it's kind of they've lost their distinguished standing, but nonetheless, even number 7 is pretty high up in the rankings. But so most of their films are very depressing, and I can't watch things like that. Just it's things are bad enough as they are, without adding to them by watching a depressing movie. So, I like light entertainment. It's something that cheers me up. Right? So, Bielatar, not for me, I'm afraid. William Taylor says Boris Johnson party also proved that COVID wasn't actually the new Ebola. They didn't seem too worried about it. Exactly, it was a fraud. And that's what most people began to suspect after a while. It was a fraud. It was a hoax, and everyone knew it was a hoax. And all the leaders would put on their masks. Those disgusting people, Johnson and Prince Charles. He was Prince in those days. They would all go mask. And then as soon as the cameras were off, we even saw those cameras are off. They all took their masks off. It was all total fraud. And that's why they were goofing off, having these parties, in Downing Street, everyone drinking wine, while the plebs, they stayed, in their, had to stay locked up in their homes. Well, no parties for you, no visits to Granny who's dying in a nursing home for you, but we're going to party happily in Downing Street. So people understood that. And Johnson was rightly punished for it. So, God, what a nauseating person. I mean, whenever I think about these British leaders, Johnson and Starmer, God, I mean, even sort of Rishi Sunak is better than either of those two. William Taylor says Elon was using strategic ambiguity. I think that was apropos of Judy's comments about "I'll give you a child." Because I'm just curious what he meant. I mean, whether he intends to impregnate her, offering to impregnate her, or he's offering one of his children, and he's got about 12 of them. Anyway. Yobachi, thank you so much. Thank you very much for your generosity. I really appreciate it. Cynthia says, I didn't mention Ferenc Molnar simply out of the blue. You missed my 2 comments above it, which will make sense of it. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's exactly what happened. I saw your comment about Molnar before I saw your comment about Molnar and want to there. It's this way of going from screen to screen, which is a little difficult. But yeah, I understand now why you brought up Molnar. And again, I didn't know that. I should have known that, but I didn't know that that in Etiquette Haro. All right, thank you for that information. R Brown 1950 says, I heard the stat that Taylor Swift has about 250 million followers. Not sure if that's a global or US. Well, I imagine it's global. I can't believe it. 250 million in the US. What percentage of US women under 25 actually will vote based on a pop singer's advice? No, I have no idea either. I never know what these things mean. Like Taylor Swift's endorsement. That's what does that mean? It gets a lot of news coverage. Everyone's talking about it, but in terms of how many votes is going to change, I don't know. Peter says a very interesting 3-part documentary by Brasscheck TV called Why Are These Israelis Dancing? Claims Reagan won through subterfuge, convincing Iran not to release American hostages until after the elections. Well, I have to say, I've always been very skeptical of that story. There's never been any evidence put forward to advance it. I mean, it's been, one of the famous conspiracy theories, such as like Nixon in 1968. Um, behind the scenes, told the South Vietnamese not to cooperate with Lyndon Johnson, and therefore he sabotaged Lyndon Johnson's peace agreement, even though there was no peace agreement. But he made sure that Lyndon Johnson's peace attempts would fail. So that's the conspiracy theory for '68. And then there's a similar conspiracy theory for 1980 that Ronald Reagan conspired with the Iranians to keep the hostages and thereby win the election. He was afraid of the October surprise that the hostages would be released before the election, then Jimmy Carter would win. No evidence has ever been put forward. This is just a nice theory, and I don't notice that there was ever any particular improvement of relations between Iran and the United States following Reagan's assumption of power. The truth is that the Iranians, they didn't like Jimmy Carter. They really took a hatred for Jimmy Carter, and they weren't going to do anything for him. They weren't going to release the hostages. I mean, yeah, Carter was negotiating away, but the Iranians were in no mood to give Carter any favors. So you don't have to think of these conspiracies of Reagan did this and this and this. The Iranians, just in the same way with Nixon and the South Vietnamese. The South Vietnamese knew there was an election taking place in the United States. They weren't happy with the pressure that was being applied to them by Johnson to come to an agreement that they didn't like. And so obviously the South Vietnamese, in their interest, basically ignored the pressure that was coming from the Johnson administration and waited, hoping that they would get a better deal from Nixon. And so you don't have to think that there was some plot about Nixon. The point is that the people who put forward these conspiracies, they're the same crowd who hate Trump. The bad guys are always the Republicans, so therefore they always assume that that's the kind of thing they would do because that's who the Republicans are. They are the bad guys. So of course Nixon was conspiring behind the scenes to sabotage a peace agreement. Of course Reagan was conspiring with the Iranians to keep the hostages in prison for a little bit longer in order to win an election. That's what they would do. So in the same way with with all the stories about Trump, well, of course he did a deal with Putin about the the bounties on American soldiers. But of course Trump used the Russians to win an election. That's what Trump would do. So that's why I just don't. I don't buy any of these stories, and it's always the same. It's always these terrible Republicans who are doing these conspiring. Anyway, Rob Barnes says Reagan connected the average person. Carter was much less affable and had an awful record. Average Americans are influenced less by intellectual arguments than whether a candidate sincerely reflects American values. That's also why elitists, more university credentials, support Democrats. Every 4 years, Democrats temporarily adopt populist agenda to flip the uninformed. Once elected, they ditch the populist agenda and get back to the long march policies. I think that's very well summarized. The Democrats, yeah, they play the populist thing, but usually it's like the populist economics. But again, they never really pursue the populist economics, but they play on that during elections. They don't go for the populist issues on social and cultural things. They don't like that. That's going to upset their base. But on economics, they do the populist. The thing about Carter was that people took a dislike to him. I mean, he ran that perfect campaign in 1976. Somebody that nobody knew, Jimmy Who, one-term governor of Georgia, and he knocked out all the political heavyweights from the Democratic Party. But once he was in power, people very quickly tired of his sanctimonious tone. I mean, he was a very, very self-righteous, sanctimonious person, always felt that he was better than everybody else. And Reagan was just a much more of a regular guy. Somebody that people could relate to. And, he was very humorous. He was very funny. I mean, like when he spoke, his jokes were very good. He was a professionally trained actor. He knew how to deliver a line, which Carter didn't know how to do. So people really liked Reagan. And I think your point is that people could relate to him. They can relate to Trump in the same way. Yeah, Harris brought up the business. Oh, he was a billionaire, and he got 450 million from his father, and so on. Which whether it's true or not, it doesn't really matter. Trump has an ability to relate to people. Yeah, he's the son of probably his dad wasn't a billionaire then, but Trump's dad definitely was rich. But Trump has always had an ability to deal with ordinary people, with workers at the construction site. Harris doesn't have that. It doesn't have that at all, and you saw that during the debate with her smirking and rolling of her eyes. Anyone who has even a remote popular touch would know. Don't roll your eyes. It's a real turnoff. Don't smirk. Don't make faces. People don't like that. Bubble. Don't be disrespectful. Particularly to a former president. Those are real turnoffs. And the fact that she didn't know what a turnoff that is, tells me that she's not going to succeed. And Steve says, personally, I think it's a matter of how one defines justice. Surely would not want to leave it at that. Up to the deep red Lindsey Graham, for instance, or Michael McCall, right wing, right blue, just another false dilemma prepared on the great unwashed. Well, I'm just not exactly sure what that's in reference to, but there is a real question. I mean, if Trump does pursue seriously an exit from Ukraine, he is jeopardizing his future, because I think that they could well move to impeach him, and then Lindsey Graham and Michael McCall and a lot of the Democrats, a lot of the Senate Republicans would not support him in an impeachment trial. So I think he's risking his future. He could get convicted and thrown out as president. So he has to be very careful in what he does. This the deep state. I think is playing for keeps when it comes to Ukraine. And if you start, we're going to just do a deal, and they say, hey, you're betraying Ukraine, you're selling out to Putin. Yeah, I think he's really risking his future. And of course, then not just is he risking his presidency, he's risking ending up in prison, because he's still got these criminal charges that are hanging over him. So that's something he has to think about very seriously. We know every single Democrat is going to vote to impeach. We know every single Democrat in the Senate will vote to convict. So the impeachers only need to peel off a few Republicans, and Trump is done. And he knew that. I think that was the reason why he didn't pardon Julian Assange, because that was made clear to him with his second impeachment trial coming up, that Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell and the rest would not vote to acquit if he were to give Julian Assange amnesty. So, yeah, that's that's something he has to think about. R. Brown says the Haitians are getting cash cards when they get in, rather than spending the cash for food. They grab a few snacks, we call them pets, and have more cash for other activities. Eat the pets, rape the women, push the drugs, also known as New Democracy Loving Americans. God help us. Yeah. I can see that, the cash cards, and you say, well, but I don't want to spend my money on supermarket meat, when there's fresh fowl that you can help yourself to in the public park, or if there's dogs and cats that you can just steal and eat. Yeah, I mean, just I mean, definitely. I mean, you remember Trump called Haiti he was called that famously. He called it a shithole country, and when he said, why do we always get people from shithole countries? Why do we never get anyone from Norway? And of course, it answers itself, but it was Haiti that he referred to as a shithole country. Why can't we get Norwegians in here? So, and then R. Brown says Biden was acceptable to old Democrats who are sort of centrist. Moving him out for Harris may work in Trump's favor. The senile centrist is out, and the far left Harris is in. That will help Trump at the margins with independents, labor unions, minorities. This election's outcomes will hinge on moving 1% to 2% in the middle. Harris, I think. I agree with you. I think Biden had that, maybe undeserved, but he had a reputation whereby unionists and workers generally regarded him as one of theirs. He'd been around since 1972, so he had a lot in the bank that he could call on and said that they would support him. Harris doesn't have anything in the bank. That's really the problem. She was really thrust into that role by elites, and it's far from clear, still at this stage, that she's going to do better than Biden. I mean, it's never was obvious that she would do better than Biden. The media are trying to spin it that, she's doing fantastically well, but it's not obvious because she doesn't really have anything in the bank. Not that much is known about her. Her voting record isn't particularly distinguished. And as you say, the kind of centrist voters might well be turned off by her because they don't believe her conversion. She's now, she's a centrist now, but the question then is, well, how genuine is her conversion? I mean, anyone can say, well, I'm now a centrist. I believe all sorts of things that 4 years ago I didn't believe. Well, when did that happen? I mean, 4 years ago, she was 56 years old. So it's not like, she was a callow youth and she just learned a lot of things along the way. She was 56 years old. She'd already been in politics for some time. And now suddenly she's changed all her positions. So it's not going to be credible to genuinely centrist voters. Oh, now she's a centrist. Now she suddenly, believes in the Second Amendment and so on. R. Brown says most Americans hate unfairness. Most know that the debate moderators were biased for Harris. That may be a noticeable rebound effect to Trump's benefit. I agree with that. I mean, I think so. And then Judy says, your assessment is logical, but what the Dems are doing is outside the bounds of normal politics. They needed an excuse for rigged polls to show a boost for Kamala so that there's a cover for vote fraud. They needed a drastic change so that their outrageous vote rigging can be given a plausible cover. Well, you may be right there. I mean, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you. I think that's that could well be. I think there's going to be very serious vote rigging in November, and I agree that once she's there, that'll give a certain plausibility in the way that Biden. No one really believed that Biden can win an election, but there's going to be given more plausibility that, well, Harris had this real popularity. She really caught on with the with the public. Yeah, I mean, I think that they are probably thinking uh, along those lines. But ultimately, it has to. The only way you can avoid a stolen election is if you have a substantial margin for Trump. If Trump doesn't win it by a substantial margin, then I think that the Democrats will steal it. I mean, there's no question. I mean, he has to win. It really is like it's too big to steal. I'm not at all sure it is too big to steal. In such a divided country, in a 50-50 country, it's very, very hard. And the Democrats are masters of it. They've been doing it throughout American history, stealing elections. So yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you that Harris. Um, hmm, let's see. NKMRD says, yes, I think that's right. Harris somehow lowered the bar, lowered the standard of the legacy of the position of the president of the US itself, but others have done that before her in their way. No, I think there's a continual degeneration of the presidency. I mean, again, when when I was young, when say Nixon would enter a room, that was a real tension, the real awe, somebody really important has entered the room. And everyone, like stood to attention, this is, it's the president of the United States. And that's a big deal. Same thing happened with Ronald Reagan, suddenly, he had a commanding presence, that, and I remember when, in those days, that say if there's some international event, the president of the United States would always arrive last. Because he was the most distinguished person in attendance, and he would arrive last. If there's a funeral or something and the president is there, he would arrive last because, hey, he's the most important person. Now the ceremony can begin. But the gradual degeneration of respect for the presidents, I think, began with Bill Clinton. I mean, Clinton was just someone no one could respect. Even before he became president, all the sordidness that came out, with the Jennifer Flowers, and all those Playboy models, and then of course during his presidency, I mean, everybody knows it was just banging everything in sight. And then, of course, there was the Monica Lewinsky and the sordidness of all the Monica Lewinsky thing. So it's been a steady progress of deterioration for the presidency. But Harris was really the worst. I mean, I don't know. Even when she referred to Trump as this fellow, I mean, he was a former president. I mean, even if he weren't former president, I mean, to refer to him like this fellow, it's just so rude, so disrespectful. And so that anybody who's aspiring to the presidency would talk like that to anyone who's there, in the third person, and say this fellow. It's just I don't know. It's really quite disgusting, and that's why I think it's going to hurt her, going forward to the election. That I think she was disrespectful, and people don't like that. They don't like arrogance, and they don't like disrespectful. Trump is a former president. Trump is much older than she is. You have to show some respect, and no one likes anyone who's disrespectful. But they all told her, this is, hey, this is a clever thing to do. And then MKMRD says, regarding the pets issue, I didn't know this was an issue in the US. I thought it was just in Germany where these stories prop up. Oh, that's interesting. Regarding swans, I have pretty authentic secondhand knowledge that they are on the list. Horses as well. Yeah. That's absolutely right. There's a lot of animals around. I mean, swans, the beautiful animals. Boom, they're there. Just you know, steal it, and then of course, dogs, cats. They're always around. More cats than dogs because of course, dogs are usually only out with their owners. They don't just wander around, but cats do wander around, and therefore they're very they're very susceptible to kidnapping and you know disappearance, should we say. So yeah, and then but horses again, they quite, I mean, if that's relatively easy to do, and horses are big animals, so there's a lot of meat on a horse. So yeah, I mean, and you're right. I mean, that it's a serious issue, and that's why I think that this is going to be a big issue, because I am absolutely sure, I can say it right now, I am sure that these stories are true. Whether it's Springfield or somewhere else, we are going to learn a lot more about pets being stolen and eaten. I mean, we know it's true. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing for the media to insist. Oh no, it never happened. Of course it happened, because as you point out, it happens in Europe all the time. Of course it happens. Brown, thank you so much. Great show. Thank you so much. The next 60 days are going to be wild. But thank you for your generosity. And I think that my time is up. Thank you so much, everybody who has joined me. Thank you for all your questions and comments and suggestions, ideas. Thank you. Really appreciate it. We're going to do some more couple of podcasts over the weekend, and then of course we're going to do another live stream with Peter on Monday, and then my own solo on Tuesday. And so thank you again. The campaign's going to go on. I think it's a pretty busy schedule over the weekend, so we'll keep that in mind. So thank you. I'll see you very soon. All the best. Good night.